Ayato is an ugly, pathetic, lonely loser with no friends and no chicks. The only person he had was his sister, but one day she disappeared to find meat and never came back. So, he decided to go find her and become the strongest swordsman, and rizz every hot girl in his school. One day while walking down the street, when he sees a piece of clothing fall out of a window, thinking he's doing something helpful, he jumps up to grab it and return it. But he accidentally walks in on a girl changing clothes. He gets really embarrassed, quickly apologizes, and covers his eyes, turning around so she can get dressed. After she's done, the girl looks at him and asks what the f he's doing in her room. Ayato nervously hands her the handkerchief she dropped, and she lets out a sigh of relief, thanking him for helping her out. Just when things seem to calm down, her attitude changes. She starts chanting some weird magic, and before Ayato knows it, she blasts him out of the room with a huge magic attack. He falls to the ground but lands safely, looking totally confused. The girl tells him that even though she's thankful for his help, he still has to pay for barging into her room and peep at her plots. Scared, Ayato admits that he's a new transfer student and didn't know it was a girl's dorm. The girl asks for his name, and Ayato says it's Amagiri Ayato. She introduces herself as Alexia, a top student at the school. Just as things are getting awkward, a bunch of ugly students start gathering around to see what's going on. Alexia challenges Ayato to a duel, saying if he wins, she'll let him go free. Ayato tries to explain that he doesn't have a sword, but just then, some random guy throws him one. Ayato sighs, reluctantly activates it, and gets ready to fight. Alexia, pissed, does the same. The duel starts with Alexia using a fire spell, and then she follows up with a stronger one. Ayato easily dodges both of her attacks and counters. Alexia starts to get suspicious. How does he block that? She turns up the heat and sends another fire attack his way, but Ayato cuts through it and even saves her from a mysterious arrow. As she is thankful to him for saving her, Ayato was having a feel of her cannons. Just then, a blonde girl walks in, clapping her hands. Alexia asks who she is, and the blonde girl introduces herself as the head of the Red Lotus. She quickly stops the duel, explaining that since Ayato isn't fully registered yet, he can't participate in duels. Ayato sees her massive cannons, asks for her name, and she tells him she's Enfield Claudia, the president of the student council. Claudia gives Ayato a tour of the school and tells him that as a scholarship student, he's supposed to help restore the school's reputation in an important upcoming competition called the Festa. She offers him anything he wants, but Ayato asks to feel her massive cannons.
What do you mean by that?
I means he doesn't need anything. Claudia laughs and wonders why he even joined the school. Ayato, remembering his sister Haruka, asks if Claudia knows her. Claudia shows him that Haruka was enrolled at the school 5 years ago, but her records were erased after she left the school only a few months after joining. Claudia also tells Ayato about a powerful weapon called the Serverista, mentioning that it hasn't been used in a battle for 5 years. She gives Ayato a spare weapon and promises to help him get ready for his own Serverista. The next day, in class, Ayato is paired with Alexia, and she's not happy about it. Despite her attitude, she thanks him for helping her earlier. Behind them, a guy named Yabuki, who's also Ayato's roommate, introduces himself. He explains that Alexia isn't just any student, she's a princess from a small European kingdom, and she also has a rare genetic power. On their way to the dorm, Ayato returns the weapon to Yabuki, and their conversation is interrupted by a loud voice criticizing Alexia for dueling a rookie. The man challenges Alexia to a fight, but she firmly declines without hesitation. Ayato learns about the school's ranking system, where students are placed into named cults. The top 12 students are called the Page Ones, and Yabuki explains that Lester, a student ranked 9th, has been challenging Alexia to a rematch after losing to her 3 times. Ayato recalls a moment from his past when his sister warned him to heed their father's advice, to stay out of fights because his overwhelming power could harm himself and those around him. The two shared a rare, heartfelt promise to protect one another. Waking from his nap, Ayato lets out a disappointed sigh. The next morning, as he runs, fragments of the previous day replay in his mind. Lester, fueled by anger, had to be calmed down by his friends to stop him from confronting Ayato. Alexia, with her sharp tongue and fiery demeanor, had criticized Ayato's lack of sophistication, adding with a sly remark that she wondered how long his innocent act could fool others. He asks her why she duels so much. Surprisingly, Alexia admits she needs the money, even though she's a princess. Ayato is about to ask more questions when Yabuki interrupts, asking if Alexia has found a partner for the Phoenix Festa. Alexia looks uncomfortable, and Ayato asks if she has any friends to pair with. She stumbles over her words, and Yabuki pushes her to explain what kind of teammate she's looking for. Just like a crown princess, she demands a knight. Yabuki had enough with her crap, leaves. Just then, Ayato clumsily asks for directions to the boys' dorm, and Alexia laughs at how clueless he is. Ayato then compliments her laugh, and used some Reddit pickup lines which made her embarrassed. He asks her to show him around the city as a thank you for helping him earlier, and she agrees, though she's a bit shy about it. The next day, in class, everyone is shocked when Alexia talks to Ayato, since it's rare to see her interacting with other students. A little later, Ayato sees a girl sitting next to him. She's his childhood friend, Seiya, who left to study overseas 6 years ago. Seiya complains about being forced by her pathetic dad to attend the school and advertise his new weapon. Seems interested in Seiya, but Alexia gets jealous and starts acting annoyed. Alexia cuts into Ayato's chat with Seiya just as Seiya offers to show him around. Acting like she's being forced, Alexia firmly says, "I don't break promises," and takes Ayato with her. As they're about to leave, Claudia steps in and uses her massive cannons as advantage. She says she should be the one to show Ayato around. The three girls argue over who should do it. After the fight, Claudia hands Ayato a document about his Ogre Lux weapon and tells him he needs to take a compatibility test. Alexia and Claudia argue some more, and Ayato asks them if they're friends. Alexia quickly says that they've just crossed paths a few times. Claudia leaves, and Ayato is left with Alexia and Seiya, who both agree to show him around. During the tour, Seiya is amazed how Alexia get out in one piece after dueling Ayato. Alexia challenge her for a duel to show her. But before the duel can start, a mysterious man shoots arrows at Alexia. Without hesitating, Alexia throws a fire spell at him, but another man appears and blocks it. Seiya, acting cool, pulls out a huge gun and blasts the attackers. Afterward, she turns to Alexia with a bored look and asks if she's ready to continue their duel. At the same time, Ayato arrived to see the hot girl wet. The next day, Ayato and Claudia talk about the attack on Alexia. Claudia reveals that Alexia isn't cooperating with the investigation, but Ayato still wonders why Claudia cares so much about Alexia's safety. Suddenly, the elevator stops, and they run into Lester, who's also there for the Ogre Lux compatibility test. Lester tries to use the Serve Aresta, but the weapon keeps rejecting him. When it's Ayato's turn, the weapon tries to attack him, but he takes control and slams it into the ground. Claudia praises him for taming the wild weapon, and everyone is surprised when Ayato passes the test with a 97% compatibility score. That night, Ayato visits Claudia's dorm and gets a little embarrassed when he sees that she's dressed like she wants to punished by Meat Stick. Claudia cuts to the chase and shows him a list of students who were injured and had to drop out of the Phoenix competition. Ayato figures out that the same group that attacked Alexia must be behind the injuries. Claudia tells Ayato that the school's disciplinary committee suspects Lester and his followers and asks him to secretly protect Alexia. Ayato asks her why she cares so much, and Claudia responds that, as student council president, it's her job to protect the students. She asks him to stick with Alexia for time being to protect her. She offered Ayato someone on one counseling as his senior, but when she shows him her massive cannons, he panicked and bolted. The next morning, Ayato can't help but stare at Alexia as she walks by. She notices him looking and asks what he's staring at, blushing. Ayato, feeling embarrassed, quickly compliments her, making Alexia turn even redder. She suggests they go out and grab lunch, so they head to a burger place. As Alexia enjoys her burger, Ayato starts to ask about her princess manners. She lightly scolds him for being curious but explains that a friend from back home introduced her to the place. Ayato smiles and changes the subject, telling her about his conversations with Claudia about the attempts on her life. He warns her to be careful and avoid going out or dueling alone. But as expected, Alexia refuses. She says she won't let a bunch of pathetic losers change the way she lives. Ayato smiles at her usual stubbornness. Just then, Lester and his lackeys show up. He mocks Alexia for being so open about being on a hitman's list. Alexia coldly tells him to stop eavesdropping and reminds him he's not strong enough to be a real threat to her. Lester slams his hand on the table, demanding Alexia fight him. Ayato steps in to stop the fight, but Lester dismisses him. Ayato refuses to back down, calling Lester a fool trying to fix his broken ego. Lester gets mad and grabs Ayato by the collar, threatening to crush him. Ayato refuses to fight and just insults Lester more. After a tense moment, Lester finally walks off in frustration. Alexia praises Ayato for being her knight. Later, as Ayato and Alexia are walking around, they see a group of students from La Wolf fighting. Alexia instantly sees that the fight is a cover-up for an attack. Ayato asks if she thinks the students are involved in the assassination attempts. Alexia says she doesn't think so, though she knows the LeWolf school is a bunch of pathetic losers who would do anything for money. The fight breaks out, and Alexia dodges the first attack with ease. She quickly knocks out the attackers and arranges their bodies in a pile. Then, she grabs one guy by his messy hair and demands to know who hired them. The guy admits that someone paid them to hurt both Ayato and Alexia. He points to a veiled man in the distance, revealing that the employer is watching them from the woods. The veiled man tries to escape, but Alexia chases him down. In the woods, a group of veiled men appears, and one of them shoots a light arrow at Ayato to distract him so they can get away. That night, Ayato sneaks into Alexia's room through the window. He gets excited when she asks him to take off his clothes. Alexia quickly realizes what's happening and scolds Ayato for his thoughts, saying she just wanted to fix his jacket. As she stitches it, Ayato notices a childhood photo of her. He picks it up and asks about the friend who showed her the burger place. Alexia blushes and tells him about a tomboyish friend from back home who loved sneaking out of the palace. One day, she got lost and was almost grabbed by a group of thugs, but the girls in the photo saved her. Alexia learned later that they were from an orphanage in the slums. She kept sneaking out to follow them. Ayato asks if the girls knew Alexia was a princess, and she admits she kept it a secret. Alexia tells him that she came to Asterisk to earn money for the orphanage. Ayato wonders why she didn't just use her royal status to fund it, but Alexia explains that her kingdom won't approve of such a budget, so she's doing it on her own. She shows him a handkerchief embroidered by her best friend from the orphanage. The next day, Ayato notices something different about Alexia. She's acting strangely, so Ayato talks to Yabuki about it. Claudia walks in, and Yabuki tells her about Alexia's behavior. They all figure out that Alexia must have received a letter from her attackers and is planning to confront them. With determination, Alexia walks into an old, run-down building and demands the attacker show his face. Norman Silas, one of Lester's lackeys, appears with a creepy smile. He congratulates Alexia for figuring out who he is, but Alexia points out that she only figured it out after he slipped up and said something he shouldn't have. Silas asks her what he said, and Alexia reminds him of the conversation he had with Lester at the burger joint. Silas compliments Alexia for being clever, but then he says Ayato's provocation must have been planned too. Alexia confirms it, and Silas moves on to business. He orders Alexia to withdraw from the Phoenix Festa, but she refuses, drawing her weapon and threatening to take him down. Just then, Lester's angry voice echoes through the building. He asks Silas if he's the one behind the attacks. Alexia interrupts and reveals that Silas is working with another school to target strong students at Seidoukan Academy. Lester scolds Silas for betraying his fellow students, but Silas mocks him, saying that every student at Asterisk is an enemy, and that he's just profiting off his hatred. Lester tries to attack Silas, but a veiled man appears out of nowhere, catches Lester's weapon, and tosses it aside like it's nothing. Silas summons more veiled men, revealing them to be robotic puppets. He assures everyone that they're just puppets. Lester tries to fight them off, but the puppets keep resetting after every hit. They attack him with light bullets until he falls. Silas orders the puppets to surround him and Alexia, mocking Lester as he gets overwhelmed. Alexia decides to take action and summons a fire dragon to burn the puppets. Silas praises her, but the puppets soon outnumber her and they capture her. While in captivity, Alexia reveals the school behind the attacks, and Silas knows he can't let her go now. He kicks her wound and orders a puppet to finish her off. The puppet raises its weapon to strike, but just as it's about to hit, Ayato jumps in and cuts the puppet in half. Instead of thanking him, Alexia scolds Ayato for getting involved in her business. Ayato admits that after meeting her, he's made it his goal to protect her, just like she protects the kids in the orphanage. Alexia blushes, and just when it seems like things will calm down, a puppet emerges from the dust with Silas on its shoulder. Silas congratulates Ayato for the surprise attack, then summons more puppets to fight. The puppets shoot light bullets at Ayato and Alexia, but Ayato quickly activates a special power to protect them. In a flash, he takes down the puppets and confronts Silas, who's starting to panic. Silas desperately tries to fix his puppets and orders them to attack again. As Ayato dodges and fights, he realizes Silas is controlling the puppets using a chess-like strategy. Silas screams in frustration as Ayato continues to dismantle his puppets. In a final move, Silas summons his queen, a giant puppet, to finish Ayato off. Ayato dodges the first attack and quickly destroys the queen with 9 precise sword swings. Silas jumps onto a random puppet and tries to escape, but Ayato chases him down. With Alexia helping, Ayato knocks Silas down, and just as Claudia arrives to wrap things up, Ayato suddenly feels a sharp pain. It's like an invisible chain is holding him back, and he collapses. Ayato has a flashback to how his sister used to restrict his powers to keep him safe. He wakes up, finding himself lying on Alexia's lap facing her cannons. She assures him she doesn't mind, but Ayato still feels excited. She asks who put the spell on him, and he admits his sister did it. When she asks why, Ayato shares that he's been looking for his sister, who disappeared 5 years ago. He then proposes that he and Alexia team up for the Phoenix Festa. Alexia agrees, her eyes teary from the emotion. Later, after Silas is defeated, Yabuki steps out from the shadows. He and Claudia talk privately in a secret tech room, discussing something shady. Meanwhile, someone watches them from a CCTV and laughs. In a meeting with the other student council presidents, Claudia updates them on the new Overlux development. She tells them she'll be sending engineers to the partnering school to investigate further. One of the committee members reminds her of the unspoken rules about secret deals, but Claudia reassures them that her agreement with the other school is open and official. In the hallway, Ayato accidentally bumps into a short girl, and both of them blush when she falls. Ayato quickly apologizes, then helps her up, taking a twig out of her hair. A loud voice calls out to the girl, and she quickly grabs her weapon and runs to meet the person calling her. Ayato watches her leave and suddenly remembers that he's late for his meeting with Alexia. In the training room, Ayato and Alexia start sparring. Ayato manages to keep up with her attacks, but Alexia tricks him into making a wrong move. She sends a huge fire surge at him, but Ayato cuts through it and the fire disappears. He raises his sword, holding it at her throat. The buzzer sounds, ending their training session, and Alexia complains about losing to him again. Ayato tries to make her feel better, saying it was a close match. He explains that he can only use his full power for 3 minutes before needing to activate a spell to hold back his strength. After some thought, Ayato talks about a student from La Wolf, known for winning 2 Lindworm Fests in a row. Alexia looks a bit off when he mentions her, and Ayato notices. He asks her what's going on, but Alexia quickly changes the subject. Soon after, Claudia enters the room and interrupts Lester's apology to Ayato. Behind her are 2 girls from Seidoukan Academy. One of them, Camilla, seems calm and collected, but the other, Ernesta, is acting a little crazy. Claudia introduces them to Ayato and Alexia. Ernesta tells them she's really looking forward to seeing Ayato fight. She starts walking around him in a strange way, and Alexia quickly gets angry. She pulls out her sword and warns Ernesta to stay away from Ayato, but Ernesta ignores her and keeps studying Ayato. After a while, Ernesta whispers in Ayato's ear that next time he won't be so lucky and gives him an unexpected kiss on the cheek. Both Alexia and Seiya get furious at Ernesta's actions. Camilla apologizes for Ernesta's behavior and notices Seiya's cool-looking gun. She points out the flaws of the gun, and Seiya admits that it could be better but warns Camilla not to insult her father's work. When Camilla realizes who Seiya's father is, she refuses to take back what she said. Claudia steps in and reminds everyone about their mission. Seiya wants to duel Camilla, but Claudia says they should save it for the Phoenix Festa. After Claudia and her guests leave, Seiya asks Ayato if he'll be her partner for the Festa. But before he can answer, Alexia claims Ayato is her partner instead, obviously a little jealous. On their way to Seidoukan, Camilla and Ernesta talk quietly about their secret plans against Ayato and Seidoukan Academy. The next day, while Yabuki is explaining Seidoukan's curriculum to Ayato, he hears a slap. When he investigates, he sees Kirin being slapped by her guardian, Kuakairu. Ayato steps in to stop Kuakairu when he raises his hand to hit Kirin again. Kuakairu introduces himself as Kirin's uncle and challenges Ayato to a duel. Feeling awkward, Ayato agrees. Kuakairu says he'll stop hurting Kirin if Ayato wins the duel. In the duel, Ayato tries to convince Kirin not to fight, but she calmly says that nothing will change her mind. Kirin draws her sword and attacks with fast and precise movements. Kuakairu orders her not to cut through Ayato's Lux sword, but Kirin's speed puts Ayato on the defensive. After a few minutes, Ayato tries to finish the duel with one big swing of his sword, but Kirin dodges it and cuts through his school badge, claiming victory. Kuakairu walks off with Kirin, and Ayato is left thinking about the duel. Alexia scolds Ayato for fighting Kirin, the top student in the school. Kuakairu also scolds Kirin, saying she's weak and that her only real strength is in sword fighting. Kirin feels down and agrees with her uncle's harsh words. Later, in the training room, Alexia confronts Ayato. She says that Kuakairu is wrong for treating Kirin like a tool. Ayato thanks Alexia for understanding, but Alexia admits she wasn't upset about the duel itself, but that Ayato lost. She tells him that Kirin is undefeated, even though her weapon is just a Japanese sword. Alexia says that if they want to win the Phoenix Festa, they'll need to come up with a new plan. Ayato meets Claudia by the pool to get a new school badge. Claudia tells him that Kuakairu is not only an employee of a powerful organization called the Galaxy Integrated Enterprise Foundation, but he also holds a lot of influence. He's in charge of scouting talent for the academy. Ayato realizes that Kuakairu is probably forcing Kirin to fight against her will. Claudia adds that Kirin has personal goals and that Kuakairu's selfishness is making it harder for him to rise in rank. Ayato asks Claudia how she knows so much about Kuakairu, and she quietly reveals that her mother works in the foundation as an executive. As Ayato walks back to his dorm, he wonders about Kirin. A group of boys points out that Kirin is waiting for him in the cafeteria. She nervously thanks Ayato for standing up for her, but Ayato reminds her that he lost the duel. He pats her on the head and opens the door to his room, revealing a bunch of curious cats on the floor. Later, Ayato and Kirin are walking down a straight road. Kirin tells Ayato that her father's training style is very strict. Ayato says he's heard about it, and Kirin asks if he could perform one of her father's sword styles. Before Ayato can answer, she starts to recite his sword moves from their duel and apologizes for talking too much. Ayato laughs and says it's okay. He asks her what she's fighting for, and Kirin says she's fighting to free her father, who's in prison. She says her uncle has promised to help her, but Ayato tells her that following him won't lead anywhere good. He promises to help her achieve her goal if she wants it. Kirin just gives a small, sad smile and says her uncle hates Genestella. Then she quickly changes the subject and asks about his training. Ayato casually invites her to join him, then realizes he should probably ask Alexia first. Kirin looks disappointed and admits she was warned not to train with high-ranked students. Ayato rethinks his offer and instead invites her to his early morning solo sessions. Kirin blushes at the idea of training alone with him but nervously agrees. Later, Seiya suddenly jumps on him and starts questioning him about Kirin. After finally letting go, she says she was looking for him to ask something. Ayato tells her he already agreed to be Alexia's partner, which surprises her. Even so, she keeps pressing him about Kirin. When Ayato explains who she is, Seiya suddenly feels insecure about her small chest. At lunch, Alexia also questions Ayato about Kirin, but he only tells her they train together. While they talk, he notices Alexia struggling to eat her spicy food and offers to trade meals with her. Somewhere else, Ernesta watches Ayato on a monitor. She notices the girl next to him and asks who she is. Camilla tells her it's Kirin, the top student of Seidoukan. Ernesta laughs and asks if Camilla got any useful information from the school, but Camilla says she found nothing. Ernesta doesn't seem worried. Instead, she's already thinking about how much they'll gain if Seidoukan loses the Phoenix tournament. Camilla doesn't like how Ernesta treats everything like a gamble. While they watch, Ayato and Kirin unknowingly hold hands and blush. Suddenly, two red lights shine through the fog. Before they know it, monsters attack. Ayato quickly cuts off one of the monster's hands, but he's shocked when it reattaches itself immediately. More monsters rush at him, and even though he keeps slicing them, they just regenerate. Kirin figures out the problem. She focuses on one monster, cuts it apart, then immediately attacks the liquid remains and destroys its core. The monster dies instantly. The rest panic and run away. Ayato is impressed and praises Kirin for solving it faster than him. He picks up the broken core and realizes it's connected to AniLegend. But before they can do anything, another group of monsters appears and throws firebombs at them. The explosions make the ground collapse, and Ayato falls. Kirin grabs his hand, but his weight pulls her down with him. Watching from her monitor, Ernesta isn't happy that her monsters lured them in so easily, but she quickly cheers up, excited for the next part of her plan. Ayato and Kirin land in an underground water channel, struggling to stay afloat since neither of them can swim. Before they can react, a giant dragon-like monster bursts out of the water. Ayato quickly activates his sword and puts up a protective spell just in time to block its attack. The dragon disappears beneath the water, waiting for its next move. Kirin realizes the situation is bad and tells Ayato to leave her behind so he won't be disqualified if she gets hurt. Ayato laughs and tells her not to say things like that. Thinking fast, he breaks part of a stone pillar and places Kirin on it to keep her safe. The dragon attacks again, but Ayato is ready and cuts off its head. The victory doesn't last long, though. The dragon regenerates instantly. Even worse, its core keeps moving, making it impossible to destroy. Kirin quickly observes the pattern and confirms that the core is shifting positions. That's when Ayato decides to use a special move. He extends his Lux sword, slicing through both the dragon's firebombs and its entire body at once, cutting the core in the process. The dragon vanishes completely, but the moment it does, Ayato's constriction spell activates, and he falls from exhaustion. As they sit, drying their soaked clothes, Ayato opens up about his weakness. He can't fight for long. Kieran gets a little jealous when he mentions that he's pushing himself to fight alongside Alexia, but Ayato quickly reassures her. Feeling guilty, Kieran steps closer. Then, Ayato asks her again, why is she fighting? This time, she tells him everything. 5 years ago, a thief broke into a store where she and her father were. The thief took her hostage, and her father killed him to protect her. But because her father was a Genestella and the thief was a normal human, he was sent to prison. If nothing changes, he'll be locked up for decades. That's why she has no choice. Her uncle is the only one who can help her. Ayato listens quietly, then gently pats her head. He tells her that following her uncle's plan will only lead to a dead end. But if she wants, he'll help her reach her goal. Kieran looks at Ayato, and Ayato realizes he's staring at her underwear. Suddenly, a rescue team arrives and pulls them both out of the ditch they fell into. The next day, Kuakairu orders Kieran to stay away from Ayato and not get involved in his problems. But for once, Kieran refuses. She tells her uncle that she's making her own decisions now. This makes Kuakairu angry, and he slaps Kieran across the face, reminding her that everything she has achieved is because of him. Kieran doesn't back down this time. She rejects any further help from her uncle and even tells him that she no longer wants his influence. In a burst of frustration, Kuakairu raises his hand to strike her again. But this time, Kieran catches his fist mid-air, squeezes it, and breaks free from his control. She walks away without looking back. Kuakairu tries to threaten her, asking how she plans to stay ranked number 1 without his help. But Kieran calmly replies that she doesn't care about being number 1. Later, during their duel, Kieran thanks Ayato for agreeing to fight her. She explains that fighting him is her first real step in making her way in Asterisk. Ayato promises to give it his all. Meanwhile, the top students of the school are discussing the duel. Alexia voices her concern for Ayato, but Saya reassures her, saying Ayato has fought stronger opponents. Lester adds that Ayato has a plan, and Yabuki mentions that Ayato had come to him to borrow a Lux, just like Lester did. The duel starts, and Kieran wastes no time attacking with swift, precise sword movements. Ayato blocks each strike and swings his sword to create some space between them. Kieran then starts chanting something strange and declares she's about to finish him off with a powerful final move. But Ayato powers up, preparing himself for her attack. He blocks her powerful swing, releasing a thick fog around them. Kieran leaps backward and skillfully blocks 3 light shots aimed at her. Ayato smirks from the smoke and pulls out a spear. Ayato tosses his spear at her and teases that the more tricks you have, the harder it gets to keep up. Then, he pulls out 2 daggers, tricking Kieran into focusing on defending against them. At the right moment, Ayato releases a dagger from his hand and catches Kieran off guard. She leaps into the air to perform her final move, but Ayato grabs her, slams her to the ground, and wins the duel. After Ayato is declared the winner, Alexia and Saya congratulate him in the locker room. Then, Claudia enters the room with Kieran, who asks if she can join Ayato and the girls for training. Alexia gets mad and scolds Saya for always intruding on her training with Ayato. Saya agrees to let Kieran train with them, but then Kuakairu bangs on the locker room door, demanding to see Kieran. Ayato lets him in, and Kuakairu scolds Kieran for fighting in a duel he didn't approve of. Kieran reminds him she doesn't need his help anymore. Kuakairu raises his fist to strike Kieran, but Ayato steps in, holding him back and warning him to stop. Kuakairu threatens Kieran, saying he'll expose her father's secrets to ruin her. But Claudia intervenes, threatening to tell Kuakairu's boss about his plan to ruin a student's reputation for his own gain. Kuakairu gets nervous and quickly walks out, ignoring Kieran's tears of gratitude. Ayato walks over to Kieran to comfort her, patting her on the back. Kieran wipes away her tears and thanks him for everything. She then nervously asks if they could start calling each other by their first names from now on. Meanwhile, in a secret room, Camilla and Ernesta watch how the top students of other schools fall into their traps. They cheer because now their school has a much better chance of winning the Phoenix Festa, especially since most of the top-ranked students are disqualified due to injuries. They discuss how to deal with the only obstacle standing in their way, Ayato. The next day, after training with Saya and Kieran, Ayato, Yabuki, and Alexia meet up in the cafeteria. A random female student approaches Ayato, asking for an autograph and wishing him good luck in the upcoming festa. The girls get annoyed when Ayato gives attention to someone other than them. But Yabuki tries to explain that it's normal for people to be curious about Ayato, especially after he defeated the top-ranked student in the school. Yabuki reminds the girls how they also got attention when they first rose to the top. Alexia gets a little nervous and changes the topic. Ayato admits he was shocked when he found out that Seiya had paired up with Kirin for the Phoenix Festa. Seiya explains that she needed a tag mate to qualify for the competition so she could make Camilla eat her words, and apologize for her disrespectful comments about Seiya's father. Kirin adds that she agreed to be Seiya's partner because she also wanted to participate in the competition out of her own free will. Alexia mocks the girls, saying they have no teamwork, unlike her and Ayato, but Ayato calmly asks Kirin and Seiya to work on their cooperation. Seiya announces that she and Kirin won't be training with them the next day and will instead spend time together to strengthen their bond. The following day, Seiya admits that she has no idea how to bond with people, and after some awkward small talk, Kirin nervously admits that she also doesn't know how to make friends. Seiya gets an idea and suggests they go shopping for a gift for her father's birthday. After visiting a few shops and not finding the right gift, they decide to retrace their steps and head back. On their way, Kirin asks Seiya what her father is like. Seiya answers that he's somewhat of a mad scientist. Suddenly, Seiya gets an idea and asks Kirin to go with her to a shop she found on the map. When Kirin asks why she needs her, Seiya explains that she's bad with maps and always gets lost when she tries to follow one. The two girls head to an illegal secondhand gun and Lux shop in a shady alley. Kirin looks nervous, but Seiya buys a busted gun after getting a good deal. Seiya gets excited about her find and then asks Kirin what she wants to do next. After some persuasion, Kirin agrees to try something fun. In the next scene, Seiya teaches Kirin how to swim at a public pool. She asks Kirin why she didn't ask Ayato to teach her, and Kirin loses her balance when Ayato's name comes up. Seiya apologizes, but Kirin explains that she doesn't want to seem vulnerable in front of him. Seiya praises Kirin for her bravery and goes to get drinks. While Kirin practices on her own, she accidentally bumps into a random blonde girl lounging in a raft. The blonde girl scolds Kirin, but then recognizes her as one of Seidoukan's top students. She quickly figures out that Kirin must have lost her rank and can't swim, and she starts running her mouth about it. Seiya returns just in time and throws an ice cube at the blonde girl to silence her. The blonde girl gets mad and challenges Seiya to a duel. She introduces herself as Weinberg Violet, rank 35 at Queen Vale Girls Academy. Seiya isn't impressed by Violet's introduction and tells her to start the duel. The fight begins, and Seiya knocks Violet out with one blast almost immediately. The crowd cheers, and Seiya is declared the winner. Later, Seiya tells Kirin that she needs to take more pride in herself and grow stronger. Kirin thanks Seiya for the advice and asks why she chose her as a partner. Seiya explains that Kirin has many great qualities as a fighter, especially since they use the same sword style, which makes them a perfect team. The next day, Kirin and Seiya practice their battle teamwork and do a great job in the training room. A few days before the Festa, the president of Lewolf Academy sends an order for a school prisoner to eliminate Ayato before his Lux becomes a bigger problem. The prisoner agrees to do what's asked, as long as the president promises to keep her sister safe. During the opening ceremony of the Phoenix Festa, Ayato notices the Festa president while he's making an entry speech. He asks Alexia what she knows about him, and Alexia says the president is power-hungry and corrupt. Ayato catches a glimpse of the president's evil grin before it quickly fades. The president then announces that using more than one weapon during the competition will now be banned, so the contestants better pay attention to the new rule. In the preparation room, Ayato decides to invite Lester for a quick lunch before their matches. Lester refuses the offer and says he only cares about fighting Ayato, not anything else. Before Ayato can go after Lester, Seiya suddenly shows up and clings to him. Kirin nervously walks up and offers Ayato a lunch she and Seiya prepared for him. Alexia gets jealous and storms off to eat by herself while the rest of the group follows her to the waiting room. After eating, Ayato tunes into the live broadcast of the competition while the girls discuss their opponents. The second match of the Phoenix Festa begins, and Ayato and Alexia are introduced. The referee starts the match, and the opponents rush at Ayato and Alexia. Alexia steps aside, letting Ayato fight. Ayato temporarily breaks free from his restraining spell, extends his Lux sword, and cuts through the badges of his two opponents with one swing. Ayato's team is declared the winner, and the crowd goes wild with excitement. On their way to the waiting room, Ayato and Alexia talk about their plan for the next round. They go over what went well and what they need to work on. Meanwhile, Yabuki approaches them with a secret plan. He wants to sneak into the press conference to get information about the next match between Lewolf and AniLegend. The announcers introduce the AniLegend team and share that their puppets are powered by AI and will be used throughout the tournament. In the reserved seats for AniLegend, Camilla gets mad at Ernesta for revealing the puppet secret. She worries it could cost them the match, but Ernesta stays confident, saying her puppets are strong enough to win no matter what. Back in the ring, Ernesta's male puppet gives the LaWolf team a minute to do whatever they want. The LaWolf team gets angry and tries to attack, but the puppet is shot in the head by its partner. After a little back and forth, the female puppet agrees to let the opponents have the full minute, promising not to fight back. The LaWolf team reluctantly agrees, and the referee starts the match. During the 1-minute break, the LaWolf team decides to fight the male and female puppets separately. The male fighter uses his drill arm to attack the male puppet, but the puppet easily blocks it and mocks him by counting down the seconds. The fighter gets frustrated and asks his teammate for help, but they both realize they can't get past the puppet's defense. Desperate, the male contestant uses his full power, but the puppet blocks it without effort. The puppet watches as the fighter collapses from exhaustion, then announces that the 1-minute break is over and crushes his badge. Ernesta and Camilla are declared the winners. The crowd cheers loudly, and the commentators are impressed by how quickly the fight ended. Ayato and the girls talk about how tough it will be to get through Ernesta's puppet. Suddenly, Seiya gets a call from her father, who tells her that the puppets are controlled by AI. Ayato recognizes Seiya's father's voice and says hello. Seiya's father asks if she got the new gun he sent, but Seiya tells him she hasn't yet. He tells her to check customs, but Seiya says her current gun works just fine for now. After the call, Seiya goes to check customs, and Kirin excitedly follows her. Yabuki tells Ayato and Alexia that he plans to sneak into the winner's press conference to get more information. Ayato and Alexia decide to practice in the AniLegend waiting room. Meanwhile, Ernesta praises her puppets for their good work. RMC, the female puppet, thanks Ernesta for her praise, but when she notices her partner laughing, she smacks him and demands respect. Ernesta explains that RMC's partner is weaker because of his male features, but it's really because RMC is the one who limits him. On their way to the Festa arena, Ayato and Alexia stop to watch a street fight. Alexia immediately recognizes the fighter as Urze's Irene, a top student from LaWolf. After Irene knocks her opponent down, she notices Ayato and walks over to him, smirking. Alexia steps in front of Ayato to protect him and asks Irene what she wants with him. Irene tells Alexia to move, but Alexia warns her that street fighting is dangerous, and that Irene could be disqualified for it. Irene ignores her, activates her weapon, and Ayato and Alexia barely manage to dodge it. Suddenly, a young voice calls out from the crowd, and Irene gets nervous. It's Priscilla, Irene's younger sister. She apologizes to Ayato and Alexia for Irene's behavior and forces Irene to apologize too. Priscilla drags Irene away, and Alexia explains to Ayato that there are some vague records about the two sisters, sent by Claudia. Ayato then asks Alexia why she provoked Irene earlier. Alexia explains that Irene was targeting Ayato, since she ignored Alexia when she tried to step in. She also says that LaWolf is known for shady tactics and might be planning something against Seidoukan Academy. Back in the ring, the commentators announce the match between Kirin and Seiya. The crowd laughs when they mistake Seiya for Kirin because of her smaller chest. The match begins, and Kirin faces the shorter of the two LaWolf contestants. She dodges his attacks quickly and slices his badge in seconds, ending the match. The crowd is stunned by how fast it was. Meanwhile, Seiya is fighting her opponent, blocking every attack with skill. She gains the upper hand and starts to use her gun to defend herself and attack back. Her opponent jumps into the air for a big move, but Seiya blasts him to the ground. The announcers declare Kirin and Seiya the winners, and the crowd cheers. In the next round, Ayato and Alexia face two girls from Queen Vale Academy. Alexia decides to fight them by herself since Ayato already fought in the first round. The girls charge at Alexia, but she fights back with fireballs. One of the girls trips and gets hit by a fireball, breaking her badge. The second girl mocks Alexia, thinking she's beaten, but Alexia surprises her with a firebomb that traps her. The bomb explodes, and the commentators announce Ayato and Alexia as the winners. While waiting for Kirin and Seiya to return, Alexia nervously offers Ayato a packed lunch. She asks if he can pat her head, just like he does with Kirin and Seiya. Ayato pats her on the head, and Alexia blushes, awkwardly opening a virtual screen to watch the ongoing matches. In the ring, Lester and his partner Randy are running around, trying to avoid their opponents, Irene and Priscilla. Lester and Randy hope to wear Irene's weapon down by dragging out the fight, but Randy decides to test what Priscilla can do. Irene uses her weapon to control the gravity under Randy's feet, making him lose balance. Lester tries to attack Irene, but she blocks him and kicks him away. Randy loses consciousness because of the gravity, and Lester struggles to get up. Irene stands up and walks toward her sister, lowering her neck. She uses her weapon to absorb power from Priscilla's blood. She explains that her weapon works by using the wielder's blood, but absorbing others' blood balances it out. Lester calls Irene a vampire, and she creates 3 deadly orbs, sending them at him. Lester dodges one, but the others are too strong. His axe breaks when he tries to block them, and eventually Irene's orbs overpower him, and he surrenders. Claudia congratulates Ayato for making it to the finals. Ayato's device rings, and Kieran appears on the screen, nervously telling Ayato that Seiya is lost. Ayato excuses himself from Claudia and promises to make it up to her later. As Ayato searches for Seiya, he runs into Priscilla, who's being chased by thugs. Ayato helps her escape and asks why she's being chased. Priscilla explains that Irene caused trouble at a casino, but quickly changes the subject. She mentions that Irene is on her way to rescue her, and Ayato gets worried. Irene suddenly jumps into the scene, threatening Ayato. Priscilla deactivates her regenerative blood power and tells Irene to calm down. Irene promises to behave and asks Ayato what he's doing alone in an alley. Before Ayato can respond, he gets a call from Seiya, who says she's found her way back to Kieran. Ayato suggests they meet at the burger joint and explains he was in the alley looking for a friend. Irene apologizes for her outburst and hands Ayato a copy of the final match schedule. Later, Irene storms into the LeWolf Student Council president's office, demanding to know why her sister wasn't properly protected. The president dismisses her complaints, saying that some people don't follow his orders. Irene attacks him, but only scratches his cheek. The president laughs and tells her that causing harm to him will only hurt her. He mentions that Ayato stopped his goons from attacking. Irene blames the president for making her owe Ayato, but after she leaves, the president instructs his assistant, Corona, to perform a fortune reading. Corona excitedly tells the president that the cards show Irene and Priscilla will win. Back at Seidoukan, Ayato tells Alexia about his dinner plans with Irene and Priscilla. Alexia gets upset and scolds him for agreeing to dine with the enemy. After a moment of anger, Alexia demands to be Ayato's +1 for the dinner. At dinner, Priscilla greets Ayato and Alexia, but Irene quickly speaks up in a rude way. Irene admits she has a huge gambling problem because she owes a lot of money to Dirk, who is the president of LeWolf Student Council. She explains that she signed a contract that keeps her from participating in the Festa and says she can't use the prize money to pay off her debts. Irene tells them that Dirk has ordered her to take down Ayato because his Lux weapon is a problem for him. Alexia wonders why Dirk would care so much about a weapon, and Irene explains that Dirk has seen someone else use the same Lux as Ayato. That's when Ayato remembers what Claudia told him about his sister being missing, and he starts to put the pieces together. He thanks Irene for the information, and Priscilla interrupts by bringing a plate of seafood and mushrooms to the table. After dinner, Priscilla apologizes for Irene's bad manners, but Ayato and Alexia assure her the dinner was perfect. Priscilla talks about how grateful she is that Irene is fighting for her, but she also explains that Irene becomes a completely different person when she uses her Lux. She apologizes again for talking too much. As Ayato and Alexia walk home, they talk about what Irene and Priscilla are going through. They decide to put aside all the sad stories and focus on winning the finals. After they split up to go to their dorms, Ayato goes to visit Claudia. When he enters her room, Claudia suddenly flips out and attacks him. Ayato barely manages to calm her down, but eventually Claudia snaps out of it and apologizes. She explains that sometimes her emotions get the best of her, but she promises to tell Ayato why she attacked him if he agrees to join her team for next year's Griffin Festa. Ayato agrees, but only if Alexia can be on the team too. Claudia agrees, but says she can't reveal certain secrets to anyone outside her team. Claudia then asks Ayato if he's ever experienced death. She explains that her weapon forces her to experience death over and over again in her dreams. She says the last person who used the weapon could only handle it for 3 days, but she has gotten used to the pain. Ayato asks why she keeps using such a weapon, and Claudia admits she needs it to achieve her goals. Ayato asks her opinion on Irene's Lux, and Claudia says it's very dangerous. Ayato thanks Claudia and leaves, but not before Claudia tries to flirt with him. Ayato quickly leaves to avoid the awkward situation. Meanwhile, Priscilla and Irene are getting ready for the upcoming match. Irene smirks at the sight of the dead bodies, reminding her of the time when Priscilla was seriously injured years ago. A huge block of cement fell on her, and she had to undergo surgery, leaving her family in major debt. Dirk paid off their debts, but in return, Irene had to work for him and use a dangerous weapon. On the day of the finals, Priscilla wakes Irene up and reminds her that they will be called to the arena soon. Irene sucks Priscilla's blood to regain her strength, and the two sisters hug before walking to the arena. Meanwhile, Ayato and Alexia discuss their strategy. Alexia says her goal is to win, no matter what the backstory of their opponents is. She agrees to follow Ayato's plan because she values what he wants. Ayato thanks Alexia for her support, and the two walk into the arena. The crowd cheers as the announcers introduce the teams. Irene activates her Lux, and the match begins. Alexia makes the first move, sending fire discs toward Irene, but Irene easily blocks them and counters Ayato's sword strike. Ayato and Irene fight close up with swords, while Alexia fires more shots at Irene. Irene dodges the shots and tries to use gravity to make Ayato heavier, but he jumps away and tells Alexia to go along with their plan. Alexia sends fire stars at Irene, but Irene blocks them with a shield. Irene brags about her power and recharges herself by sucking Priscilla's blood. While Irene is distracted, Alexia quietly tells Ayato that her part of the plan is finished, and now it's his turn to act. Irene throws Priscilla to the ground and mocks Ayato's fighting style. She then uses a gravity attack on him, but Ayato and Alexia dodge it. Alexia distracts Irene with fireballs while Ayato charges in to strike. Irene blocks his attack but is caught off guard when Ayato follows up with another strike. Ayato focuses on attacking Irene's Lux, and after a brief power struggle, Irene's Lux sends Ayato flying into the arena wall. Alexia and Ayato regroup and prepare to face Irene's gravity balls. Ayato tells Alexia to stay focused on protecting herself while he uses a special sword style to destroy the gravity balls. Ayato charges at Irene to distract her, and Alexia traps Irene with a location-based attack. Irene manages to break free and mocks Alexia right before a large firebomb lands on her. The explosion knocks Irene back, but when the smoke clears, she is still standing behind a protective barrier. Priscilla tries to check on her sister, but Irene shows a wicked, evil look. Ayato tries to save Priscilla, but he and Alexia are hit by Irene's gravity attack. Irene continues to drain Priscilla's blood until she passes out. Ayato realizes that Irene's Lux has taken control of her mind. He drags himself through the gravity-affected ring and tries to talk to Irene, hoping to bring her back to her senses. For a moment, Irene breaks free from the control, but then she screams and releases more gravity waves. Ayato feels his constricting spell lift and smirks, using his power to push through the waves. He lands a powerful blow that knocks Irene's Lux from her hand. Ayato follows up with a series of strikes, completely destroying Irene's weapon. Irene falls unconscious, and Ayato is declared the winner. Dirk, watching from a virtual screen, wonders why Ayato is in pain. He guesses that Ayato is suffering from a constricting spell. Dirk complains about his unfinished deal with Ernesta and plans how to get rid of Ayato, just like he did with Irene. Meanwhile, other student council presidents are pleased that Ayato seems to have reached his limit. Ernesta and Camilla celebrate their victory and discuss how they can defeat Ayato. Camilla thinks one of their puppets could easily beat him, but Ernesta tells her not to be too sure. They know that things can change quickly. Meanwhile, Priscilla wakes up in the infirmary, and Irene immediately apologizes for draining her blood. Irene says they lost the match, and Ayato destroyed her Lux completely. Priscilla asks if Dirk punished Irene, but Irene assures her that he didn't. Priscilla asks Irene to teach her how to be strong enough to protect herself, and Irene agrees with a smile. Back at the dorm, Alexia scolds Ayato for exposing his limited power and almost destroying himself. Ayato reminds Alexia that he promised to protect her, and now it's time to find a way to break the constricting spell. Alexia holds his face and tells him they're partners in everything. Just as they're about to kiss, the other girls burst into the room to check on Ayato, making playful comments. Yabuki overhears and wonders what will happen next. After Ayato and Irene's battle, the Phoenix Festa continues. Zinglu, a battle-obsessed student council president, watches the fight and gets excited. She asks her lackey if they can fix a match with Ayato's school, but the lackey points out that Ayato's powers are limited. However, the chief believes Ayato's weaknesses make him even more interesting. Suddenly, two evil twins, Shenhua and Shenyun, interrupt, promising to destroy their next opponent. Ayato and Alexia were discussing their strategy for the upcoming battle in the Festa arena. As the announcers introduced the qualified teams, the crowd went wild. When Ayato and Alexia's names came up, their opponents warned them they wouldn't go easy even if Ayato was hurt. Before the match kicked off, Alexia pulled Ayato aside, pointed to a marked spot on the floor, and reminded him of their plan. Once everything was set, both teams drew their weapons and the announcer signaled the start. One of the bald brothers rushed straight at Ayato, swinging non-stop, but Ayato managed to block and dodge. At the same time, Alexia launched fire at her opponent, but he easily avoided it and rushed at her. She tried using her sword, but he jumped over it and ran back to team up with his brother against Ayato. With both of them attacking, Ayato struggled to hold his ground and took a few hits. Still, he moved toward the marked spot, giving Alexia the signal. Alexia then created a blazing firewall that cut the ring in half, separating the brothers. Each of them was now stuck fighting one-on-one. Her opponent noticed she was using a lot of energy to keep the fire going and mocked her, saying the only way they'd lose now was through a surprise move. Alexia agreed that a sneak attack was the only shot. Meanwhile, the bald brother told Ayato he was doing well holding back and promised to end things with one clean hit. Ayato got closer to the mark. Then, Alexia took a hit and fired a blast into the air. Ayato understood and let loose his power. The firewall opened up just long enough for the two to swap sides and hit their opponents with a surprise attack, shattering their badges. The crowd exploded with cheers as the match ended and Ayato and Alexia were announced as winners. Afterward, the losing brothers congratulated them but warned that their next opponents, the evil twins, were far more ruthless. As they spoke, the twins, Shenian and Shenhua, showed up, acting smug and creepy. They mocked their defeated teammates and promised to show Ayato a real fight. Later, in the waiting room, Alexia told Ayato he should use his wish to find his sister if they win. But Ayato brushed it off, saying his sister probably had her reasons for hiding. Meanwhile, Seiya and Kirin congratulate Ayato on his victory and bring a surprise guest for Alexia. It's Flora, a maid from Alexia's kingdom. Flora's voice is extremely high-pitched, which annoys everyone. Flora talks about Alexia's past, but Alexia gets embarrassed when Flora shows pictures of her bathing. Flora quickly apologizes, and Ayato points out that Flora clearly loves Alexia. Flora admits that Alexia is her role model and that she wants to join Seidoukan in the future. Alexia tells Flora to wait 2 more years before enrolling, but promises she'll win the Phoenix Festa and help their country. Seiya and Kirin remind Alexia that they will be the ones to win. Flora points out that they are Alexia's rivals, and the girls exchange a glance. Later, Ayato reflects on his conversation with Alexia about his missing sister. He calls Irene, and Priscilla answers the phone, thanking him for saving Irene. Just before Priscilla invites him to dinner, Irene takes the call. She asks Ayato if he wants to meet Dirk, the president of La Wolf. Ayato confirms that he wants to learn about his lost sister, Haruka, and asks Irene to set up a meeting with Dirk. Irene agrees but warns Ayato that Dirk is dangerous. The next morning, Yabuki wakes Ayato up from his sleep. They start talking about the upcoming match and the challenges ahead. Yabuki congratulates Ayato for making it to the quarterfinals, but warns him about their next opponents, the evil twins. Yabuki shares everything he knows about the twins. Just then, Alexia calls Ayato and invites him to lunch, saying it's on behalf of Flora. Ayato watches Flora enjoying herself at the restaurant that Yabuki recommended a few hours ago. After having some fun with ice cream, Flora pulls out her notepad and starts reading some awkward questions she wrote for Ayato. Flora asks Ayato how far he's gone with Alexia in their relationship. Alexia gets upset and asks Flora where she got such a disgusting question. Flora admits that the prince, who is Alexia's older brother, asked her to investigate Alexia's relationship with Ayato. Alexia grabs Flora's notepad and warns her not to ask any more of those weird questions. Just then, a girl with glasses nervously approaches their table and asks Ayato to follow her. She introduces herself as Corona, the secretary for the student council at La Wolf, and tells Ayato that Dirk is waiting for him. Alexia frowns and wonders what Dirk wants with Ayato. Ayato assures her that he asked to meet Dirk, not the other way around. Alexia insists on coming with Ayato to the meeting, and Dirk agrees to let her join. They all get into Dirk's car, and on the way there, Alexia complains about Dirk causing Irene to go berserk. Ayato calms her down and reminds her that the meeting isn't about Irene. Dirk compliments Ayato for being smart, then tells him that he's not obligated to answer any of Ayato's questions. Ayato quickly realizes that Dirk must have an agenda, so he asks Dirk everything he knows about his missing sister. Dirk tells Ayato that he only saw Haruka once during an event called the Eclipse. Alexia gasps and explains that the Eclipse was a dangerous, underground tournament where the winner was the last one standing, and contestants could die. Dirk remembers that Haruka was a contestant but says she lost her match. However, Haruka didn't die during the game. Dirk then flips the conversation and asks Ayato what he thinks of Mesa Mediev, the person in charge of the Phoenix Festa. Ayato is confused, but before he can ask anything more, the car stops. Dirk orders them out of his car. Alexia, still suspicious, asks Dirk how he figured out where they were eating, but Dirk refuses to answer her. Corona mentions a little girl she saw with Alexia at the restaurant, and Dirk demands to know everything about her. A few years ago, Seiya approached Ayato after watching him train with his sister. Ayato nervously asked Seiya if she had watched his sister beat him in their training. Seiya replied that shouting the names of fight moves was cooler than fighting quietly, and told Ayato he needed to get used to it. Ayato gave Seiya a favor ticket and asked her to help him defeat his sister. Fast forward to the present, and Ayato is now in the training room with Alexia. During their sparring session, Alexia knocks Ayato down with a fire attack and asks why he seems distracted. Ayato apologizes and walks away to the school's fountain, where he reflects on his conversation with Dirk. Alexia walks up to him, snapping him out of his thoughts. She reminds him that he had said he wouldn't go looking for his sister, and asks if he's scared to learn the truth about why she disappeared. Ayato agrees that he's afraid of discovering that his sister might have abandoned him. Later, while Ayato is on his balcony, he hears a noise and is surprised to see Seiya drop down from the ceiling. Seiya asks her dumb friend why he looks so upset and mentions that Alexia sent her to check on him. Seiya asks if Ayato really thinks Haruka abandoned him, and Ayato's eyes fill with sadness. Seiya calls him a dummy and reassures him that his sister wouldn't just disappear without a good reason. She tells him that maybe Haruka is out of contact because she has no way of reaching him, and he needs to stop worrying about it. Seiya pulls out the favor ticket Ayato gave her years ago and reminds him of the time they tried to defeat Haruka together. She encourages Ayato to reach out to his sister and learn to rely on others when he needs help. The next day, after discussing their battle strategy, the announcer introduces the fighters of the day. The evil twins mock their opponents, saying they're nervous and showing weaknesses. One of the twins asks Alexia if she has come up with a new strategy. Ayato responds firmly that they won't lose. The evil twins admit they're excited to defeat them. As Ayato temporarily breaks his seal, Alexia draws her weapon, and the match begins. Ayato immediately charges at Shenhua, but she easily dodges his attack. When Alexia tries to fight Shenyan, he creates a smoke screen, but the two quickly realize it's just an illusion. The crowd gets frustrated because they can't see through the smoke, but Shenyan clears it. With 5 minutes left, Ayato's constriction spell starts to take effect, so he charges at Shenyan. Shenyan makes 4 shadow copies of himself, and Shenhua turns invisible. Shenyan reveals spell cards and attacks Ayato with his clones. Ayato takes down a few copies but gets hit by an explosive spell card. Alexia tries to check on him, but Shenhua appears and hits her with an explosive spell card too. The two decide to focus on taking down Shenyan first. However, Shenyan blocks Ayato's attack and reveals that the smoke screen was used to hide spell tags all over the ring. Alexia decides to destroy the tags, but Shenhua reappears and strikes Alexia with a thunder spell card. After taking down all of Shenyan's clones, the 5-minute mark hits, and Ayato feels the pressure from the constricting curse. He falls to the ground as Shenyan mocks him. Shenyan places his foot on Ayato's head and asks how it feels to lose. But Ayato surprises him by cutting through his badge with one quick swing. Shenyan then appears from the air, mocking Ayato. He traps Ayato in a dome of spell cards, but after struggling inside, Alexia saves him. She apologizes for not being able to stop Shenyan sooner. Ayato thanks Alexia for saving him and tells her to buy him some time while he meditates to regain his strength. Alexia agrees to keep the twins busy while Ayato meditates. During this time, Ayato feels his powers growing as he focuses on breaking through his seal. Alexia fights back against the twins, but Shenhua goes invisible again. Alexia uses fire to burn away the invisible tags, while Shenyan creates hundreds of explosive spell cards. Alexia stands firm, allowing the ice illusions to pass through her. When Shenyan tricks her, she gets hit by a massive ice attack. Shenhua kicks Alexia in the same spot where the ice hit her, mocking her. Ayato continues meditating and remembers a fighting style his sister taught him years ago. Alexia swears to make Shenhua regret not finishing the fight when she had the chance. She creates a massive fireball, but Shenyan saves his sister and mocks Alexia for failing. As Shenion traps Alexia with more spell cards, Ayato finally unlocks his seal and cuts through the cards with ease. After saving Alexia, Ayato explains that he's broken the second layer of his constricting seal, allowing him to fight for over an hour instead of just 5 minutes. When Alexia gets exhausted, Ayato faces Shenion and starts cutting through the tags. He moves quickly, using his sword to block all of Shenion's attacks. Ayato lands a powerful punch on Shenion, knocking him unconscious. The crowd cheers as Ayato and Alexia are declared the winners of the match. In the waiting room, Flora and Claudia congratulate Ayato and Alexia. Claudia invites Ayato to her room but tries to steal him away from Alexia. Alexia drags Ayato out, and Flora watches the two women argue over him. In another waiting room, Seiya is telling Kirin a story about her father. He was in a terrible accident at work and lost most of his body. To stay alive, he had to hook himself up to a nerve center in his workshop. Kirin feels bad for Seiya's father, but Seiya stops her and says she doesn't want sympathy. She explains that Camilla was right about her father making guns to match her fighting style. Seiya also adds that if people just accept everything, they'll start talking badly about her father's work. Before their match, Camilla and her friend come to talk to Seiya. They criticize her gun, but Seiya promises to prove them wrong by defeating their puppets in the ring. Camilla agrees that if the girls win, she'll take back everything she said. The puppets always give their opponents a 1-minute grace period, and this time is no different. Kirin gets ready by pulling out her weapon. The male puppet, RD, warns her that if she wants to break through his defense, she'll need a new strategy. Kirin isn't scared. She tells him to give it a try, and after a few failed attempts, she lands a hit. She tells RD to fight fairly or she'll strike him down. RD admits he lost the first round and asks how Kirin got past his defenses. She explains that she used his predictable moves and lack of combat experience against him. Next, RMC, the female puppet, steps forward. She asks Seiya why she hasn't attacked yet. Seiya says she won't attack until the puppets decide to fight seriously. After Seiya lands a hit on RMC, the puppet switches into battle mode. While this fight is going on, a masked man from La Wolf School sneaks into the ring and kidnaps Flora. The fight continues as Seiya gets a compliment from RMC for her skillful shot. RMC then says she'll fight Seiya at full power and starts flying in the air. She moves so fast that it's hard to follow her, but Seiya manages to aim and fire at her. RMC blocks the shot with a secret weapon and comes out of the smoke unharmed. While RMC and Seiya battle in the air, Kirin and RD are still fighting on the ground. Kirin attacks hard but notices that RD is using her moves against her, predicting what she'll do next. RD shifts tactics and lands a successful counterattack. Kirin admits she needs more practice to beat an opponent like him. RD thanks her for helping him collect data on her fighting style. He calls for RMC to use their combo move, but RMC refuses, saying it's up to her when they use it. After dodging many of RMC's attacks, Seiya uses a special weapon. The two fight with full power, and after some back and forth, Seiya's ammo overpowers RMC's and forces her to create a barrier. Kirin runs over to Seiya to apologize for not helping more, but RMC turns to RD and agrees to use their combo move. They float into the air, and RMC gives her armor to RD, completing a body transformation. The girls realize they're in trouble. RD, now stronger, shows off his new body. Seiya admits it looks impressive, but then RD launches an attack, sending both of them flying. The girls quickly figure out that the body merge made RD nearly invincible. Seiya tells Kirin to hold him off while she comes up with a plan. Kirin charges at RD, trying to use her speed to land a hit, but RD hits her with his massive hammer. Seiya runs over to check on Kirin, who says she's fine and that they need to focus on defeating RD. RD powers up and threatens to destroy them. Seeing Kirin weakening, Seiya tells her to stay behind and prepares her weapon. RD attacks with the hammer again, and Seiya fires her weapon full power. After barely surviving the explosion, Seiya switches to a smaller weapon. RD shows respect for their skills before attacking again. Ayato and Alexia, watching from another room, hear the blast and rush to check on the girls. The girls apologize for not doing better, but Alexia promises to fight for their honor in the final. Seiya points out that Alexia is crazy to think they can win against the puppets, but Alexia agrees to keep fighting no matter what. Claudia walks in to encourage Kirin and Seiya, and they notice that Flora is still missing. Meanwhile, Dirk calls Camilla and Ernesta to discuss a possible partnership between their schools. The kidnapper, holding Flora, calls Ayato and his friends, threatening to hurt Flora unless they follow his orders. The kidnapper demands that Ayato put an emergency seal on his Sir Veresta Ogre Lux and avoid contacting the police. After the call, Claudia explains that using the emergency seal would shut down the Lux completely. Despite Alexia's concerns, Seiya suggests they ignore the kidnapper's threats and figure out a way to save Flora. Claudia steps in with a plan, and the group agrees to go along with it. Claudia instructs Ayato to seal a fake Lux to trick the kidnapper, while she uses her influence to delay confirming Ayato's emergency seal. She predicts Dirk's moves and suggests waiting to confront him until after the closing ceremony of the match. The next day, while Kirin and Seiya continue searching for Flora at LeWolf's campus, the announcer introduces the contestants for the semi-final. Ayato reassures Alexia that they'll make it to the finals and rescue Flora with help from Kirin and Seiya. The two teams get ready for the match. Alexia casts a huge fireball at Lemus, but he's unharmed and fully armored. Lemus summons a horse and charges at Alexia. Ayato watches as Alexia dodges a spear attack from Lemus, but his own opponent, Small Fry, catches his attention. Small Fry notices that Ayato isn't using his usual Sir Veresta Ogre Lux and wonders if Ayato is underestimating him. Ayato apologizes and explains he's not using it for personal reasons. Small Fry attacks first, and Ayato blocks it and counters. They continue their close-range sword fight. Ayato realizes that Small Fry's sword is lighter than his, so he uses it against him and lands a quick counterattack, cutting through Small Fry's badge. Meanwhile, Alexia faces Lemus, whose thick armor blocks her fire attacks. He tries to strike her with his spear, but she dodges and creates a firewall to protect herself. When Lemus tries to dive through the firewall, Alexia counters and barely avoids the tip of his spear. She continues with multiple fire attacks, and after a few moments, Lemus falls off his horse due to his armor overheating. His armor dissolves, and Alexia praises his perseverance before taking his badge. The announcer declares Ayato and Alexia the winners. Ayato immediately calls Seiya to get an update. Seiya tells him their search hasn't been successful so far. Ayato asks them to send him the maze map so he can join the search. Seiya and Kirin feel bad about Ayato fighting the puppets without his Lux, but they promise to keep trying to rescue Flora. While Ayato and Alexia discuss how to find Flora, Yabuki bursts into the room and agrees to help, even though he's clearly nervous. Ayato secretly contacts Irene, who suspects Flora might be in the LeWolf lab. Ernesta notices that Camilla and have different goals. Ernesta says her goal is to create puppets with human-like willpower, while Camilla wants to make powerful weapons. Camilla agrees and remembers when Ernesta was in the hospital after her parents were killed. Camilla promised Ernesta half of her life after replacing her body parts with puppet parts. Camilla swears to help Ernesta, but Ernesta says her puppets aren't reckless. She's determined to win and get her puppets into the school. Suddenly, one of their puppets, Ard, wakes up and asks Ernesta not to touch his battle scars because they show his growth. Camilla and Ernesta are surprised that their puppet recognizes growth. RMC also wakes up and asks for a change in the merging process, but Ernesta tells her it's impossible to make any adjustments before the finals. One evening, Ayato finds himself sneaking around the area, trying to avoid the LeWolf men who are chasing him. He takes a sharp turn, hoping to throw them off, but instead, he runs straight into the kidnappers standing by a car. Just as they're about to spot him, a mysterious young girl appears and offers to help him escape. Ayato is surprised and asks if she knows him, but the girl says she doesn't. As the LeWolf men get closer, the girl grabs Ayato's hand and leads him into a dark alley away from them. Once they're safe, the girl asks what Ayato is doing with the LeWolf men. Ayato stays quiet, but the girl assures him that it's fine if he doesn't want to explain. She tells him to wait for a while before going back onto the street. As Ayato thanks her for helping, the girl surprises him by calling him by his full name. He's shocked, as he's sure he never introduced himself to her. The girl, noticing his reaction, praises his quick reflexes. She explains that while he's well known from the Phoenix Festa, he didn't disguise himself very well. Before they can talk more, a man suddenly appears and threatens Ayato. The girl calmly mocks him and, recognizing him as a former student of Glong's school, stands her ground. The man attacks, but the girl easily dodges his wild swings. Frustrated, the man starts fighting recklessly, but with a swift move, she knocks him into a wall with just a small kick. After this, she agrees to help Ayato if he follows her to a rooftop. She compliments his teamwork and selflessness, then asks about the missing person. Hesitant at first, Ayato describes Flora, and the girl promises to help. She asks him to keep their meeting a secret, then suddenly her brown hair turns white. Ayato recognizes her as Sylvia from Queen Vale Girls Academy, the rank 1 student. Sylvia starts singing, and as she does, her powers activate, helping her find Flora. She tracks Flora to the northern part of the city. Sylvia gives Ayato her contact information and wishes him good luck, then skips off. Ayato thanks her and heads back to meet the group, not mentioning Sylvia's help. When Ayato tells the group about Flora's location, Seiya insists that Ayato and Alexia should focus on winning the finals. She tells them to leave finding Flora to her and Kirin. Alexia tries to protest, but Yabuki convinces her. Seiya reassures Ayato that they'll find Flora before the end of the match and send him a signal when it's safe. Meanwhile, Dirk talks to his hired kidnapper, who tells him about a suspicious man near the area. Dirk tells the kidnapper to use Flora if any intruders appear. The kidnapper senses intruders nearby and prepares for action. Yabuki hacks the entrance to an abandoned building, and the group enters. Suddenly, a dark entity appears and tries to attack them. Kirin steps up and defeats it easily. However, more dark creatures rise from the ground, and the group is surrounded. Seiya fights back with her gun, shooting down many of the creatures. Yabuki struggles to dodge their attacks while Seiya calls for Kirin to cover her. As Kirin runs to help, her leg gives out, but she pushes through and takes down more of the creatures. Seiya powers up her sniper and obliterates the rest. After the fight, Seiya feels weak but pretends she's fine. Yabuki warns the group about more entities, and Lester appears, blaming Yabuki for dragging him into this mess. The girls ignore his complaints and continue their search for Flora. Yabuki sneaks off to execute his own plan, leaving Lester to deal with the remaining creatures. In the arena, the final match is about to begin. Ard, the puppet, challenges Ayato to make the fight more interesting than Seiya's. Ayato responds coldly, saying he's only interested in winning. The announcer announces that Ayato has changed his weapon and requests an emergency seal for his Lux. The countdown begins, and the match kicks off. Ayato and Alexia charge towards Ard. Ayato unleashes a series of 9 sword strikes, but Ard blocks each one. Alexia follows up with fire attacks, but RMC interferes and complains about being left out. The two teams execute their plan. Alexia will fight Ard, while Ayato protects her and predicts RMC's moves. Alexia asks for Ayato's help, and he distracts Ard long enough for Alexia to land a fire attack. But Ard dissolves the fire easily. The two regroup and discuss their next move. They need to come up with a new tactic to handle the merged attack. RMC unleashes a massive firework-like attack and combines with Ard to strengthen their power. Ayato runs through the explosion and cuts through RMC's badge, weakening her. As RMC apologizes to Ard for letting her guard down, she asks him to do whatever it takes to win. Kirin and Seiya, meanwhile, are still searching for Flora. The kidnapper appears, holding Flora and threatening to kill her if Kirin doesn't drop her weapon. Seiya attacks the kidnapper, causing him to release Flora. Kirin runs to lead Flora to safety, but the kidnapper strikes her with a shadow spike. Seiya jumps in to stop him from attacking Kirin again. Kirin fights back, using her sword to defend herself and weaken the kidnapper. The kidnapper tries to mock her efforts, but Seiya fires a shot, hitting him directly. Back in the arena, Ayato and Alexia are struggling to keep up with Ard's powerful, merged form. Ard taunts them, saying he will decide when the match ends. He throws his massive hammer, trapping Ayato and Alexia. But Alexia fights back with fire and manages to block the hammer's full impact. Seeing her still standing, Ard praises her stamina. Just as Ayato and Alexia are about to be overwhelmed, Claudia takes control of the announcer's microphone and announces Flora's safety. Relieved, Ayato activates his Lux, cutting through Ard's hammer like butter. The crowd is in shock as Ayato declares the start of their counterattack. After a fierce battle, Ayato finally lands a powerful blow on Ard, breaking his badge and defeating him. The crowd goes wild as Ayato and Alexia are declared the winners of the Phoenix Festa. Meanwhile, in a secret underground area, Flora's kidnapper, Warnher, is attacked by a mysterious figure. Warnher falls, and Yabuki appears, complaining about his ruined coat. Seiya and the others, relieved that Flora is safe, realize that Yabuki is missing. Lester confirms that Yabuki disappeared right after the girls went to rescue Flora. Back at the arena, Camilla and RMC approach Seiya, asking for a rematch. Camilla admits that while Seiya's weapon was stronger, the fused puppets are nearly as powerful as an ogre Lux, and a simple weapon can't match it. Seiya, looking determined, agrees to the rematch. In a dark room, Dirk calls Ernesta to tell her they couldn't find the powerful ogre Lux they needed for her third puppet, a semi-finished one. Ernesta, staying calm like a true strategist, doesn't show any frustration. She wonders what her next step should be. Meanwhile, Ayato, Claudia, and Seiya visit Kirin in the hospital. After a short while, Alexia walks in and calls out for Flora. Flora enters, shy at first, but then takes over the room with her loud voice. She apologizes for causing trouble and hugs Alexia, crying as she seeks comfort. Outside the hospital room, Ayato and Alexia share a drink, thanking each other for their teamwork and effort. They talk about their plans for winter break. However, Alexia surprises everyone by revealing that she bought plane tickets for everyone to join her in her kingdom, Lalania, for the holidays. The next scene jumps to the airport in Europe, where Flora's loud voice fills the air again as she greets everyone and ushers them to a car. The streets of the kingdom are filled with a welcoming parade, celebrating the success of the Phoenix Festa winners. In the palace, Alexia storms into her brother's room, annoyed by his grand entrance. He retorts that he wanted to congratulate them, introducing himself as Jar, the king of the country, and his wife, Maria. After a little back and forth with his sister, Jar mentions that he'd like to meet the Festa winners before a banquet that night. On a tour of the palace, Alexia explains to Ayato that her country, Listen, is controlled by the Integrated Enterprise Foundation, which has too much power. She wants to free her country from their control. Later that night, Ayato hears Flora's voice in his head, telling him that Seiya is missing. Ayato finds Seiya on the roof, and she apologizes for cutting off communication a few months ago. She explains that she couldn't bear the pain of their limited communication, especially after his sister went missing. Seiya promises to always be there for him moving forward. Ayato thanks her and agrees to rely on her. Over dinner, Claudia invites the group to join her team for the upcoming Grips Festa. Claudia reminds Ayato of his promise to join if Alexia joins, and Alexia reluctantly agrees, although she's unsure about the Festa. The next day, Ayato visits the girls' room and is shocked to see how beautiful they look in their dinner gowns. After some awkward glances and compliments, Ayato is appointed to escort Alexia to the banquet. At the banquet, Alexia offers Ayato a drink to calm his nerves and complains about her brother's involvement with the Integrated Enterprise Foundation. Ayato asks about Claudia's father, and Alexia explains that her father is too good to climb the Foundation's ladder, unlike her brother's wife. When Alexia's brother calls for her, Claudia eyes Ayato suspiciously. Ayato walks around the room and finds Kieran struggling with some people who are questioning her about her experience in the Festa. He steps in and helps her, but Kieran suddenly starts spilling her insecurities. Ayato reassures her that she's just as strong as the other girls, but Kieran insists that he hold her arm like an escort. Seiya pops up out of nowhere and grabs Ayato's other arm. The two girls continue their arm wrestling battle, but then a man's voice laughs at the scene. He questions Ayato's interest in joining the Grips Festa, warning him against joining Claudia's team. Suddenly, the man summons a giant mixed creature to attack the party. The guests panic and start running. The creature tries to crush Kieran, but Seiya jumps in, pulls out her hidden gun, and takes a shot at the creature. Ayato jumps into action, unlocking his constriction and leaping into the air to face the creature. He kicks the creature to the ground and attacks it from all sides. Together, Alexia and Seiya use their powers to assist Ayato in bringing the creature down. The strange man watches them defeat his monster and starts laughing maniacally before disappearing into the night. The next morning, Jar informs the group that the attacker's name is Gustav Mallow, a wanted criminal. Claudia adds that he's known as a terrorist. Kieran notes that the man was likely carrying out someone else's orders. Jar jokingly asks the group how they feel about the police wanting to put them under protection, but Claudia firmly states that none of them need protection. As the group begins to leave, Jar pulls Ayato aside and asks to have a private conversation with him and Alexia over tea. He bluntly asks Ayato to marry Alexia to avoid the Foundation's plan to marry her off to someone else. Alexia, shocked, asks her brother why he wants her to marry. Jar explains that if Alexia doesn't marry Ayato, the Foundation will see her as a valuable asset, and they will try to control her. He believes it will be easier for Alexia to stay safe if she marries Ayato. Ayato refuses, saying he doesn't want to be the one who binds Alexia to her country. Jar accepts his response but asks if Ayato would agree if it were Alexia's desire. Both Ayato and Alexia nervously react, and the conversation ends. Alexia leaves angrily and Jar warns Ayato that she will try to change the country, but it will only bring her suffering at the hands of the real rulers. Ayato doesn't want to get involved, so Jar suggests Ayato check on Alexia. Meanwhile, Claudia makes a secret phone call, eyeing Ayato suspiciously. Ayato and Alexia visit an orphanage where Sister Teresa, the manager, greets them. Teresa reveals that the nuns in the orphanage are part of the Genestella group, an organization that teaches the orphans self-defense. Ayato notices a greenhouse, which used to be the dueling area for Genestella children. Alexia opens up to Ayato, explaining her plan to win the Grips Festa to free her country from the Integrated Enterprise Foundation's control. On the way out, Alexia sees a tinted car and recognizes someone inside. She rushes off, dragging Ayato through the snowy forest to meet Ophelia, an old friend. Ophelia, however, doesn't want to get involved with Alexia's plans and warns her to stay out of her destiny. Alexia challenges Ophelia to a duel, but Ophelia, without moving, counters Alexia's attack with shadow arms. She absorbs Alexia's fire and uses her energy to create a monstrous shadow arm that knocks Alexia to the ground. Ayato tries to intervene, but Ophelia threatens him. Ayato pulls out his Sir Versta and defends himself, but just as things are about to escalate, Gustav Mallow appears again, claiming he was hired to take Ayato and Alexia out. He summons more of his chimera beasts, but Ayato gets ready to fight back. He uses a special sword style to cut down one of the chimera creatures, but gets knocked down by another. However, Claudia swoops in and cuts off its heads. Gustav, surprised by the defeat, disappears into the night. Later, Ayato wakes up and finds Kieran and Saya beside him, both asleep. Alexia enters the room and tells him he's been out for 3 days. She thanks him for saving her life. Ayato asks about her past with Ophelia, and Alexia reveals that Ophelia was once her best friend. Ophelia was originally not part of Genestella but was taken by the Integrated Enterprise Foundation and turned into one of the strongest Genestella. Alexia believes Ophelia lost her will to live after being experimented on. Alexia worries that if she enters the Grips Festa, she will be forced to fight her best friend again. Meanwhile, Flora rushes into the room with an urgent report. Flying chimeras are attacking the country. Alexia realizes Gustav's plan to distract them while targeting the orphanage. She decides to take action, and the group prepares to confront the Hydra. Ayato and Alexia, working together, fight off the Hydra. After a tough battle, Ayato lands a decisive blow and defeats the creature. Gustav tries to flee, but is caught by Kieran, who knocks him out. Later, Claudia has a conversation with her father, who is trying to protect her from the Grips Festa. Claudia refuses to back down. The next day, Alexia promises her brother that she will win the Grips Festa and gain power for the royal family of Lalania. Jar, her brother, agrees to support her if she wins. Finally, Ayato gets a call from Matt, who tells him they've found his long-lost sister, Haruka. Ayato, with Matt's help, goes to the lab where Haruka has been kept in a coma for 5 years. A mysterious woman named Hilda, known as Magnum Opus, appears and claims she knows how to help Haruka. Ayato is left in confusion as he tries to understand what's happening. Meanwhile, Claudia continues to plan her moves, determined to reach her goals despite the Foundation's interference. And that's where this video ends. Watch the next one and take care.